I spent most of my life in a quiet town in western Vermont, the kind of place where nothing ever really surprises you. People grow up there, grow old there, and most of them never leave. For nearly 16 years, from my mid-20s into my early 40s, I worked maintenance for the county offices. Every weekday morning, without fail, I drove the same road to work, Hollow Creek Road. It was a narrow 2-lane stretch that wound through open fields and thick patches of pine forest. In winter, it was especially unforgiving. Snowbanks piled high on both sides, and icy wind swept loose powder back onto the asphalt no matter how often the plows came through. But I knew that road like muscle memory. I could drive it half asleep. About 4 miles outside town, just past a bend, where the trees opened into a frozen field, there was an old bus stop. Nothing fancy, just a warped wooden bench and a metal sign so faded you could barely read the route number. Line 17A, and every single winter morning, at exactly 6:40 a.m., she was there. The woman stood just off the shoulder, hands tucked into the pockets of a long gray coat, a pale blue scarf wrapped around her neck. She looked to be in her late 40s or early 50s. Average height, nothing about her that stood out, except the fact that she was always there. Same place, same clothes, same calm posture. As I passed, she would lift one hand and give a small, polite wave. Not enthusiastic, not desperate, just courteous. For years, I waved back. It became part of my routine, like checking the mirrors or slowing down at the bend. I never questioned it. Plenty of people relied on buses during winter, especially when roads got bad and gas prices climbed. I assumed she worked somewhere in town and preferred not to drive. The strange thing, looking back, is that I never once saw a bus stop there. Not before her wave, not after. No headlights, no brake lights, nothing. Still, mornings blur together when you repeat them long enough. One January morning, nearly 10 years into this routine, I drove past the stop and she wasn't there. It shouldn't have mattered, but my stomach dropped like I had missed a step on the stairs. I slowed instinctively, scanning the shoulder, the field, the tree line. Nothing, just the empty bench dusted with snow. The rest of that day fell off. Quiet in the wrong way. The next morning, she was back. Same coat, same scarf, same wave. I remember feeling an actual sense of relief and immediately hating myself for it. She was a stranger. Why did her presence matter at all? Because she'd become constant. Something reliable in a world where everything else changed. I learned the truth when I was 44. I was having breakfast at Miller's Diner with a coworker, complaining about winter driving, like everyone does. Somewhere in the conversation, I casually mentioned the woman on Hollow Creek Road. "You ever notice that lady at the bus stop out past the farms?" I said. "She's been waiting there for as long as I can remember." My coworker stopped chewing. "What lady?" I described her, the gray coat, the scarf, the wave. His expression tightened. "There hasn't been a bus route on Hollow Creek Road since the early 90s, he said slowly. "They shut it down after the crash." I felt a chill crawl up my arms. "What crash?" He leaned back. "Winter of '91, black ice. Bus slid off the road and hit a tree. Driver died. 1 passenger, 2. Woman named, I think it was Mary Ann Cole. I barely heard the rest." "Where did it happen?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "Right near that old bench." "Same spot." I left without finishing my food. That afternoon, I drove straight to the bus stop. In daylight, it looked smaller somehow. Sadder. The bench was cracked, the sign rusted nearly through. Behind the snowbank, half hidden by weeds and ice, I saw something I'd never noticed before, a small wooden marker. I brushed snow away with my glove. Mary Ann Cole, 1944 to 1991. Still waiting. I stood there for a long time. The next morning, I told myself she wouldn't be there. At 6:40 a.m., she was. Same wave, same calm expression. I didn't wave back. For 2 weeks after that, I took a longer route to work, 20 extra minutes each way. I told myself it was temporary, that I just needed distance. Eventually, convenience won. The morning I returned to Hollow Creek Road, I stopped. I don't know why. Curiosity, guilt, maybe something else. I pulled onto the shoulder and rolled down my window. She walked toward me, slow and deliberate, boots crunching softly in the snow. Up close, she didn't look old, just exhausted, like someone who hadn't rested in a very long time. "Can I help you?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "The bus is running late," she said. Her voice was gentle, thin. "It always is." I swallowed. "How long have you been waiting?" She looked down the road, eyes fixed on the distance. "A long time," she said. "But it comes eventually." I wanted to tell her the truth, that the bus was gone, that the route had ended decades ago. I couldn't. She looked at me again, really looked at me. "You have been kind," she said. "Most people don't wave anymore." "How many people see you?" I asked. She thought for a moment. "Fewer every year." I drove away without another word. 6 months later, I moved out of state. I've never driven Hollow Creek Road again, but sometimes, on winter mornings, when snow is falling hard and visibility drops low, I slow down when I pass a bus stop, just for a second, and I wonder if she's still there waiting. And I wonder what happens when no one looks anymore. I took a job no one else wanted. It was a night position groundskeeper at Ridgeway Cemetery, a small burial ground just outside a fading town in northern Ohio. The pay wasn't great, but it came with a tiny house on the edge of the property, and after my divorce, I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere empty. Ridgeway wasn't a big cemetery, maybe 200 graves total, old ones, most dating back to the early 1900s. The town itself had shrunk over the years. Factories closing one by one, families moving away. By the time I arrived, only a few hundred people still lived nearby. My job was simple: lock the gates at dusk, patrol the grounds once every hour until sunrise, make sure no one vandalized headstones or used the place for late-night drinking. I was told the cemetery closed at 7 p.m. sharp. There was one rule my supervisor emphasized more than any other. "If you see someone already inside after dark," he said, "don't approach them. Call it in." I asked why. He hesitated, then said, "Just protocol." The first few weeks were uneventful. Cold nights, wind through bare trees, the crunch of gravel under my boots. I walked the same loop every hour, flashlight sweeping over names and dates worn smooth by time. That's when I noticed him. The man stood near the far back row, close to the oldest graves, tall, thin, always wearing a dark coat and a brimmed hat pulled low. He wasn't doing anything suspicious, just standing there, facing a headstone. At first, I assumed he was grieving, maybe someone who couldn't let go. Technically, he wasn't supposed to be there after hours, but I let it slide. He never moved, never caused trouble, and by the time my shift ended, he was always gone. What bothered me wasn't his presence. It was the timing. Every single night, without fail, he appeared at exactly 11:17 p.m., not 11:16, not 11:18. I checked my watch more than once. Same spot, same posture, same stillness. Weeks passed, winter settled in. Snow covered the ground, blanketing the graves in white. Still, he came, never leaving footprints, never reacting when my flashlight passed over him. One night, curiosity got the better of me. At 11:17, I changed my route and approached the back row slowly. The air felt heavier the closer I got, like sound itself was being swallowed. When I was about 20 feet away, he spoke. "You shouldn't be here." His voice was calm, flat. "I work here," I replied. He turned his head slightly, not fully, just enough for me to see his profile. His face looked unfinished, like details were missing. "No," he said. "You stay too long." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "Who are you?" I asked. He didn't answer. He turned back to the headstone. I shined my light where he was looking. The name on the grave read, Thomas Ridgeway, 1889 to 1926. Night watchman. My stomach tightened. The next morning, I asked around town. At the diner, at the gas station. Eventually, an elderly man at the counter nodded slowly. "Old story," he said. Ridgeway was the cemetery's first caretaker. Worked nights. Died on the job. "How?" I asked. "Exposure." Heart gave out. They say he refused to leave his post during a storm. That night, I didn't see him. Relief washed over me until 11:17 passed. And then 11:18. And then 11:30. At 2 a.m., I found him standing outside my house, right at the edge of the porch light. "You missed your round," he said. I froze. I don't remember inviting you, I whispered. You're replacing me, he replied. That's how this works. The next few nights blurred together. I started losing track of time. My watch stopped working. My phone battery drained, no matter how long it charged. And every night, at 11:17, he stood closer. By the fifth night, I realized something horrifying. I could no longer leave the grounds. The gate wouldn't open. The road beyond it stretched too far, looping back on itself, and the town lights in the distance never got closer. On the seventh night, he handed me the flashlight. I waited 90 years, he said. Now it's your turn. I tried to quit the next morning. The house was empty. No supervisor, no paperwork, no records of my employment, only my name, freshly carved on a headstone in the back row.